I never thought humiliation could sound like laughter. Yet there it was rolling across my dining table, smooth as wine, sharp as glass. Make room for the tank, folks. Dad brought his spaceship again. That was my son, my own boy, whose first breath I once caught in trembling hands. The table erupted. Even my daughter-in-law snorted into her napkin. I stared at the candles flickering between us, trying to remember when love had turned into performance. My oxygen tank hissed beside me, steady and faithful, the only thing still keeping rhythm with my heart. I forced a smile. It's just air, son. You'll need it too one day. He waved me off. Relax, Dad, it's a joke. A joke, the kind that bruises pride but leaves no fingerprints. I looked around for anyone to say it was cruel. No one did. Forks clinked, wine poured, conversation moved on. I sat in silence, a ghost in my own home. Inside, I was replaying another dinner years ago when he was 6. He'd spilled soup all over his new shirt and cried, terrified I'd be angry. I told him, nothing you spill could make me love you less. Now, decades later, he'd spilled something else, respect, and I wasn't sure I could ever clean it up. He leaned back, full of confidence that only ignorance can buy. You should let us handle the house soon, Dad. Less stress for you. We'll take care of everything. My daughter-in-law chimed in, sweet but sharp. Yes, we've been talking about maybe updating the place. It's a bit old. Old? That word stung more than the laughter. My home wasn't old, it was earned. Every inch of wood, every nail, every photo on the wall had my sweat on it. I swallowed the lump in my throat. The house will stay as it is, for now. For now, my son repeated, like he already knew otherwise. Silence stretched, and I could feel the weight of unspoken plans hanging above us. I excused myself, the hiss of the oxygen tank following me down the hallway. In the bathroom mirror, I saw a man I barely recognized, tired eyes, trembling hands, shoulders heavy with years. That's when I heard it, muffled laughter again, from the dining room. Maybe he'll forget where he keeps the deed soon, my daughter-in-law whispered. Wouldn't that make things easier? He replied. My stomach turned cold. I gripped the sink until my knuckles went white. Forget. I'd buried brothers in war, built companies, survived chemo, I forgot nothing. I stared at myself and thought, I wish someone had warned me, the worst wounds don't bleed. They smile across your table. I didn't go back to finish dinner. I went to my study instead. I opened the drawer where my wife's old photograph sat, her smile still patient, still kind. You tell me to stay calm, I murmured. You always did. Outside, their laughter grew louder, filling the halls that once held lullabies. I turned off the light, sat in the dark, and whispered to the empty room, if they're planning something, they won't see me coming. The oxygen tank hissed once more, a steady, rhythmic breath, as if the house itself was still alive, waiting for justice. I used to think walls could hold memories, but that morning they only echoed silence. I moved slowly through the hallway, one hand trailing the wooden trim I carved with my own hands 40 years ago. Photos lined the corridor, my son in a graduation cap, my late wife with her sun hat tilted just so, a family trip to Yosemite where we laughed until our ribs hurt. Now those same smiles stared back at me like strangers, frozen in time, detached from the voices I heard last night. Once the old man croaks, we can tear down that god-awful shed, my daughter-in-law said, her voice cutting through the quiet like a knife. My son chuckled. Yeah, get the house appraised while we're at it. Might be worth more than we thought. I stood by the doorway, unseen, air hissing from my oxygen tube as steady as a heartbeat. My hands began to tremble not from the illness, but from something colder, something deeper. Not a single knock, no apology. I shuffled toward the window seat and sat down slowly, bones aching from years of work and, more recently, neglect. Through the glass, the backyard stretched out, the same patch of earth where I once built my son a treehouse. He was 8. He cried when he thought he saw a raccoon. I held him until he fell asleep in my arms. Now he laughed at the thought of burying me. I took a slow breath, the tube warm against my nostrils. I closed my eyes and asked myself the question I'd been too afraid to face. Did they ever love me, or just what I gave them? I remembered when I gave him the down payment for his first house. He didn't ask. I offered. He cried then, hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. Maybe that was the last time he truly saw me. "Maybe we can convince him to sign early," she said. "Tell him it's a medical release or something." The words weren't meant for me, but they reached me all the same. My fingers clenched against the armrest. I stayed by the window until the sky turned the color of rust. The house was quiet again, but not peaceful, just hollow. That night I didn't eat. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't speak. I opened the top drawer of my nightstand and pulled out an old spiral-bound notebook, the kind my wife used to keep grocery lists in. I opened it to the first page and wrote, "Day 1 after the dinner. Time 7:42 p.m. Location kitchen. Heard my son discuss selling the house. Quote, once the old man croaks. Witnesses, daughter-in-law present," she laughed. I underlined laughed. Then I opened my drawer, found an old USB drive and labeled it in black marker, "Truth." If they were going to pretend I didn't matter, I'd leave them proof that I did. I lay in bed that night with the oxygen tank humming beside me, not from sickness, but from betrayal. And as I stared at the ceiling, the chill in my bones had nothing to do with weather. It came from the cold realization that they were already grieving, not for me, but for my house. They locked the door to my study, the one room in this house that still felt like mine. I stood there for a full minute, hand on the knob, heart beating slow and deliberate. The keyhole gleamed like an insult. I jiggled it once, twice. Nothing. I found my son in the kitchen, elbows deep in the fridge. "Did you lock the study?" He didn't look up. "Oh yeah, just a mix-up. Had the cleaners come in. We didn't want them messing with your stuff." My daughter-in-law walked in behind him holding a steaming mug. She caught my eye, smirked. "You know how things tend to get lost when too many hands touch them." I said nothing, just nodded and walked out, but my jaw was tight enough to crack a tooth. That room held everything. My discharge papers from '71, my wedding photo with Ruth, the original deed to this house, my will, my military journals, my trust documents. I built this home. I laid the foundation with my own calloused hands. Now I couldn't even open a door in it. That night I sat in my chair by the fireplace, flipping through an old photo album. Ruth had written little notes in the margins. His first haircut. Our first Thanksgiving here. Promised to build the fence, never did. I ran my fingers over her handwriting, as if touching it could bring her back for a moment. Then I heard it, a soft creak down the hallway. I rose, careful not to let the oxygen tank bang against anything. I moved like I used to in the jungle, slow, quiet, deliberate. I reached the study. The light was on. Muffled voices, paper, movement. I leaned in. "Copy this one. It has his signature already." "That's not the latest trust, is it?" "Does it matter? He won't know the difference. He can't even remember his pills." My spine went cold. I stepped back into the dark and returned to my room. I didn't confront them. I didn't scream. That's what they were hopping for, the angry old man who loses control. Instead, I sat down and picked up my notebook again. Day 5 study locked. Quote, "He won't know the difference." Implication: falsifying or misusing trust documents. Witnesses: son and daughter-in-law both present. I underlined falsifying. Then I opened my flip phone and scrolled down until I found the name, Helen Masters. Voice like gravel, spine like steel and sharp as a bayonet. A fellow vet, a lawyer, and a woman who once made a 3-star general sweat during a deposition. "Hey Helen, it's me. I think I need to talk to you." She didn't ask why, just said name the place. We agreed to meet at the coffee shop near the VA, neutral ground. She always insisted on that. Later that night, I passed the study again. The door was shut, still locked. I placed my palm against it. Behind it, I could still hear rustling. My documents, my legacy, my past being sorted like junk mail. They didn't think I was dying. They were hoping I'd disappear. But I've outlasted worse than them. And I don't lose what's mine without a fight. Some storms don't announce themselves. They show up quiet, steady, and devastating. Helen knocked once and stepped inside before I could answer. She never waited for permission, only opportunity. Silver braid tight down her back, leather satchel slung over her shoulder, glasses low on her nose, scanning everything, everyone. I hadn't seen her in 6 years, but nothing about her had dulled. My daughter-in-law peeked into the foyer, brow furrowed. Is this the nurse? Helen didn't blink. Sure, let's call me that. She rolled her eyes and vanished back into the kitchen. That was her first mistake. I led Helen through the hallway, past the locked study, past the photos of a family that didn't deserve to be remembered so fondly. We stepped into the back garden, once Ruth's sanctuary, now mine. I pointed to the bench near the roses. We sat. I handed her the flash drive, wrapped in a handkerchief. Scanned deeds, 2 wills, audio from the last few nights, some notes when I couldn't sleep. She didn't look at it, just tucked it into her satchel. What else? She asked. My gut, I said. I know they're planning something. They think I'm too weak to notice. Helen leaned back, gaze scanning the windows like a sniper sighting threats. Have they taken anything yet? Not physically, but I can feel it, like termites in the beams. She nodded slowly. I pulled out the notebook. She took it, flipped through the pages, my scrawled handwriting, timestamps, quotes, context. You documented all this. Every insult, every slip. She closed it gently. You always were meticulous, she said. Can't win a war without maps. Silence fell, not the awkward kind, the kind that precedes something irreversible. She folded her hands. Do you want them out or exposed? I looked past her shoulder, through the window. My son stood at the kitchen island, laughing over coffee like he hadn't stolen years from me. Like the oxygen tank beside me was just a decorative piece. He tossed his head back, full of himself. She touched his arm, smiling too wide. I looked back at Helen. Both, I said. She didn't flinch, just smiled, the kind of smile that precedes strategy, not joy. Then we don't rush this, she said. We build it airtight. Document chain of custody, track patterns, prove coercion, show misconduct. You'll stay quiet. Let them talk themselves into the grave. I can do quiet. You always could, she replied. She stood. You'll hear from me in 3 days. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. Oh, and next time she calls me a nurse, I'll charge for the visit. I watched her go, cane tapping softly against the tile. Inside, I heard my son call out, "Who was that woman?" I replied through the open window, voice calm and level. An old friend, I said, one you'll be hearing from soon. And I swear, for the first time, the laughter stopped. I always said a man should never hide anything where he can't reach it himself. That's why I left the spare key in the rain gutter 22 years ago, and not once did they think to look. They left Friday morning for their weekend getaway. I watched their car disappear down the drive, suitcases in the trunk, laughter still ringing like broken glass in the air. I waited 2 hours, then I moved. The key was exactly where I left it. Cold, damp, reliable. I slid it into the study door and turned the knob slowly. Click. The door creaked open. Dust floated in the air, catching sunlight like smoke. My study, the one room where I once felt like a man, smelled faintly of paper, tobacco, and betrayal. I crossed to the safe behind the bookshelf, rolled in the combination, and opened the door. Empty. No will, no discharge papers, no deed, no family trust. My hand hovered in the air. It shook just slightly, not from fear, not from illness, from fury. But I didn't panic. I closed the safe, stepped over to the old oak desk, reached beneath behind the bottom drawer and slid open the false panel. Inside was the backup, a steel-cased flash drive, labeled in my wife's handwriting, just in case. God bless that woman. I plugged it into the laptop I kept under the desk, powered it up, and opened the files. Everything was there. Original deed scanned. My most recent will, signed and witnessed. Discharge papers. Trust documents, every version. Audio clips. Photo evidence. I zipped the folder and sent it to Helen. Subject line, "They opened the safe, I'm ready." 10 minutes later she replied, "Let them keep digging, I've got the shovel." I shut the laptop, locked the false panel, closed the study door. That night they came back early. My son burst into the kitchen like nothing had happened, his smile too wide, his voice too casual. "Hey, Dad," he said. "We were just, organizing some of your stuff while you rested. You've got a lot of clutter in there." I looked at him over my mug of tea. "Good," I said. "I'll be organizing something too." "What?" He blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" I sipped my tea. "You'll see." His eyes narrowed, but he didn't press. He never pressed when he wasn't sure I was bluffing. The next morning, a white envelope sat on the breakfast table, my name printed in bold type. Inside, a letter from my trust lawyer. "Dear Mr. Calhoun, this is to confirm the receipt of the updated trust documentation submitted on your behalf." I read that line 3 times. I hadn't submitted anything. They had. And now I had proof. I folded the letter, placed it beside my notebook, and added a new line under today's entry. "They filed fraudulent paperwork. This is war." Outside, the wind picked up, shaking the trees Ruth once planted with me. Inside, I sat very still, listening. Not for them. For the sound of a house preparing to remember who it truly belongs to. I used to think memories were ghosts, harmless until you gave them attention. But that morning, as I stared at the folder Helen sent back, I realized they could also be ammunition. She'd labeled it the flashback folder. When I opened it, my past unfolded like a classified file. Scans of my military service, photos from field hospitals, letters Ruth and I exchanged when I was overseas. And at the very bottom, transcripts, word for word, from the audio I'd been recording on my phone these last few weeks. "He's losing it. We'll handle the paperwork before he figures it out. Old people forget, that's nature helping them move on." My son's voice, clear, cold, certain. I pressed play again, just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. Helen's note accompanied the files. "They're counting on your silence, not anymore." I leaned back in my chair, the oxygen tank humming beside me. The soft hiss filled the silence like a metronome for my rage. There was shame, too, a bitter, heavy kind that settles in your bones. I'd served my country, saved lives, rebuilt my own body after shrapnel tore through it. But somehow, I'd raised a man who looked at me and saw nothing but an obstacle between him and a deed. My phone buzzed, Helen again. "Got everything backed up?" she asked. "Yes." "Good, you're not paranoid anymore. You're prepared." I closed my eyes. Her voice was steady, professional, but beneath it, I heard something else: belief. Someone finally saw me as more than a frail old man wheezing on borrowed air. After the call, I sat in the living room and opened another file, a voicemail I hadn't touched in months. Ruth's voice filled the room, soft and clear. "If you're listening to this, you're probably alone again. Don't let them forget who you are, Frank. Not what you gave, not what you built." My chest tightened. I hadn't realized how much I missed being spoken to with love instead of impatience. I looked around the room at the family photo above the fireplace. Smiles that were once genuine now looked staged, artificial. I stood, unsteady but determined, and reached up. The frame felt lighter than I remembered. I took it down. Behind it, a faint outline marked where it had hung for decades, a ghost of belonging. I placed the photo face down on the mantel and replaced it with my Purple Heart. The ribbon still vibrant, the metal gleaming against the old brick. When the sunlight hit it, the room seemed to change. No longer a mausoleum of what I'd lost, but a reminder of what I'd survived. That evening I drafted a letter to the Veterans Foundation. Short, simple, direct. I'd like to discuss a property donation, in honor of those who remembered their duty when others forgot theirs. I sealed it, addressed it, and laid it beside my notebook. As night settled, the house was quiet again, but it no longer felt hollow. It felt like the calm before something righteous. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel weak. I felt ready. The VA smelled like old books and stronger men. I sat in the waiting area, oxygen tank at my side, folder on my lap, pulse steady. A nurse passed and gave me the nod, not the patronizing kind, but the kind you earn. The foundation director's office was small, quiet, tucked in the back of the building like a secret someone kept with pride. He stood when I entered, early 40s, clean-cut, respectful. A soldier once, judging by the handshake. "Mr. Calhoun," he said, "it's an honor." "No," I replied. "The honor was serving with the ones who didn't make it home." He gestured for me to sit. I placed the folder on the table between us. "These are the files," I said. "The deed, scans of my trust, audio transcripts, everything." He flipped through them slowly, eyebrows rising with every page. When he reached the transcript of my son's dinner table joke, the one about me croaking, he paused. "This is unforgivable." I looked out the window. "No, son, it's predictable. I just didn't want to believe it." He cleared his throat. "You want to donate the property?" I nodded once, with one condition. He raised his eyebrows. "They don't know until it's signed. Not a whisper, not a leak, no announcement." He leaned back. "Can I ask why?" I took a slow breath, the kind that carries weight behind it. "Because I want them to feel the loss they planned for me." He didn't say anything at first, just closed the folder and gave me the same look I'd seen in the mirror the night I packed my rucksack in '69, steady, righteous, ready. "I'll make sure it's airtight," he said, "and invisible." Back home, I stayed careful. Helen worked on the deed transfer from her office, double-checking every clause. I took calls from her while walking in the backyard or out near the road. My son noticed. I saw it in his eyes. "Who keeps calling?" he asked one morning over breakfast. "Old friends," I said. "You've been going out more," he added. "You feeling all right?" I smiled, better than I have in years. He didn't like that answer. That afternoon, I saw his car follow me as I drove to Helen's office. I took a left instead down a side road toward the library, parked, waited, watched his car drive past too fast. I turned around and headed to the VA, alone. By the end of that week, the final documents were signed, witnessed, filed. In 7 days, the $4 million estate would be owned by men and women who served, who bled and lost and didn't expect handouts. The house I built brick by brick would become a home for those who understood what sacrifice meant. My children, they'd get nothing but silence. And the truth. They called it a surprise, but I saw it coming the moment my son cleaned the porch for the first time in months. "Big night, Dad," he grinned. "Hope you brought your appetite." The dining room was dressed in cheap balloons and forced smiles. My granddaughter ran up and hugged me. She was the only one who still did that without pretending. My daughter-in-law handed me a plate like it was charity. "We thought you'd enjoy a little celebration. 81's a big number." I smiled, not as big as 4 million. She froze. Just for a second, then the grin returned. They still thought I didn't know. Mid-meal my son stood, fork tapping glass. He raised his wine like a politician at a donor dinner. "To Dad," he said, fake warmth oozing from his voice. "May you live long enough to know we'll take care of everything you built." Laughter rippled through the table, light, awkward, soulless. I rose slowly. Oxygen tank hissed beside me. My legs weren't what they used to be, but my spine, still steel. "I have a gift," I said, reaching into my coat. The envelope was thick, sealed, crisp. "This is for you." My son took it, half smiling, expecting a check. His fingers tore the seal. His eyes scanned the first line, then the second, then the header, "Transfer of ownership, Calhoun Estate." His smile vanished. He looked up. "What is this?" The daughter-in-law snatched the papers. "You sign it over to who?" she shrieked. Gasps, chairs shifted. My granddaughter covered her mouth. I adjusted my oxygen mask and looked my son in the eye. "To people who won't laugh at the man who built it." He stepped back like he'd been slapped. "You can't do this." I kept my voice calm. "Already did." He lunged for the envelope, a blur of motion. His hand grazed my wrist. But before he reached it, a voice cut through the room like a blade. "That's assault." Helen stepped forward, dressed sharp, glasses glinting under the chandelier. "And I'm his lawyer," she said. The room froze. "You set this up," my son snapped. "I protected my client," she replied. "Something you failed to do as a son." The daughter-in-law's face was pale now. All her charm evaporated. "You're giving it all away," she whispered. "You'd rather strangers have it than your family." I turned toward her, tired but unshaken. "You stopped being family when you started calling me a burden." No one spoke after that. The candles flickered. The silence was thicker than any insult they'd ever thrown. Behind me, my granddaughter started crying. Quiet tears. She wasn't part of this, but now she knew. I walked out of the room, step by step, the hiss of the tank following me like a slow drumbeat. In the hallway, I paused and said just loud enough to carry, "Consider this my real birthday gift, freedom." The courthouse smelled like stale paper and cheap coffee, but to me, it smelled like justice. They came dressed in black, my son and his wife, like they were attending a funeral. Maybe they were. Their lawyer, expensive, impatient, stood tall, trying to cast me as senile. "Mr. Calhoun is not of sound mind. He's easily manipulated. This deed transfer was coerced." I sat with my back straight, oxygen hissing steady. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. Helen stood, calm as ever. "Your Honor, we submit into evidence the following: a series of audio recordings, journal entries timestamped and notarized, digital copies of all prior legal documents, and sworn testimony from Mr. Calhoun's physician regarding his cognitive clarity." She clicked a remote. My son's voice filled the courtroom. "Once the old man croaks, we'll tear it all down." Gasps. The judge leaned forward. "That was your voice, Mr. Calhoun Jr." My son stammered, taken out of context. Helen smiled. "The full context is worse." Laughter, not from me, from the gallery. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Calhoun, do you understand the consequences of the donation you made?" I looked her in the eye. "Yes, ma'am. I gave it to people who didn't need to be reminded who I am." She nodded. "You've been more lucid than your own children." Gavel down, case closed. It hit the papers by evening. Veteran donates mansion after being mocked by own son. The story exploded. Social media lit up. Thousands of comments. Some called me a legend. Others said I gave them courage. A few sent emails, veterans mostly, saying they finally felt seen. The fallout hit fast. My daughter-in-law was suspended first, then fired. Her school didn't want the PR nightmare. My son's business, home remodeling, lost half its clients in 2 weeks. People don't like dealing with men who mock their dying fathers. They came to my door once. Her eyes red, his voice cracked. Can we talk? I didn't open the screen door. I think we've said enough, I replied. My son stepped forward. You didn't have to destroy us. I shook my head. I didn't, I just stopped covering for you. They left without another word. And for the first time in years I slept, not with one eye open, not with shame in my chest, but fully, deeply, peacefully. 2 weeks later, the moving vans arrived. The veterans came in humble, grateful. Some walked slowly, canes tapping the floors I once polished by hand. Others smiled like kids seeing Disneyland. They painted the walls, put up an American flag on the front porch. I sat on a bench across the street with Helen beside me. She sipped coffee. I watched the sun hit the roof I built myself. Looks better already, she said. I didn't answer right away, just let the quiet settle. Then I nodded. Because it did. There's a kind of silence that doesn't ache, it soothes. I knelt in the garden that morning, knees cracking like old floorboards, the soil cool in my hands. The oxygen tank hummed beside me, not as a burden anymore, but a companion. Proof I was still breathing, still here. I dug slow and steady, turning earth in the corner beneath the elm. That patch used to be a sandbox back when my son was 5, before he knew the word inheritance. He'd bring me dandelions like they were diamonds. I pressed the roots of a rose bush into the ground, careful not to crush them. Ruth loved yellow roses, said they were stubborn and soft all at once. As I patted the soil down, I looked up and saw one of the veterans watching from the porch, a young man with a prosthetic leg and a calm smile. He raised a hand. I nodded back. "Dinner at 6, he called. "You're sitting at the head of the table." I chuckled. "Hope you've got strong chairs." He laughed, then disappeared inside. I sat back on my heels, wiped my palms on my jeans. No tremble, no tightness in my chest, just a full breath and the faint scent of earth and rose. I wasn't angry anymore. Just clear. I'd won, not with fists, not with threats, but with truth and paper and patience, with silence that documented and dignity that never bent low enough to beg. They mocked me, tried to erase me before I was even gone. But now strangers knew my name, and not for what I lost, for what I gave. Ruth's voice came back to me, soft as wind. "Make them remember you." They would, not because I shouted, but because I stayed standing. At sunset, I dressed slowly, slacks, old pressed shirt, cardigan. I tucked a photo of Ruth into my breast pocket. She'd want to see the table set for honor again. I stepped out the front door, now theirs, not mine, but I didn't feel empty. I felt full. They tried to steal my legacy. But a house is wood and wire. My legacy was never the roof. It was the years it sheltered, the hands that built it, the man who protected it. And the moment I walked away, not in defeat, but in peace.